Hello, my name is Saremy and I'm a trained pattern drafter, so I'm going to show you how I fit my husband's button up here. This is the Sanders button up by Elbe Textiles, and he has quite a few fit issues like the rest of us. And in fitting menswear and women's wear, it's pretty much the same exact things. So on the left, I'm going to show you some photos of his before muslin. And this is a pretty nerdy video, so if you're not into fitting, I don't know if you're gonna like this or not. So here he is on the left, and when I do a muslin, I usually do one sleeve. He likes to wear a t-shirt under his button-ups occasionally, so he wore a t-shirt here, and all I put together are the yokes. There's a front yoke, a back yoke. There are back panels below the yoke, and there are chest pockets that drop in from this chest seam that I just pinned shut. One sleeve, I did put the cuff on so I could see the circumference of it. And one note I like to always mention, if you're doing one sleeve, just note that the pattern or the garment is going to pull toward the arm with the sleeve on it. So you have to recenter the garment often, and you're going to see it off center in a few of my photos because it just happens. All right, so he has very sloped shoulders. His right shoulder is quite a bit lower than his left. And I always recommend not fitting for asymmetry unless you really want to. So I'm going to get the garment as close to fitting as possible before we get to deciding if we're going to do asymmetry fitting. All right, so here you can see, let's see if I can, I'm just going to draw on this photo. This isn't really that ideal when I'm in the photo app, but you can see here that his shoulder is sloped quite a bit different than this one, right? And we can also see these drag lines here and the kind of crashing under his arm happening here. We can also see these drag lines here pointing right here up at the top of his neck, and the neck looks quite tight. Now here on his left side, you can see again there's some crashing happening right here, or really just some fullness right there. And this is when we're getting our first glimpse, so we can see how the neck is really too high in front for him. And this wrinkle right here is not on my list of favorite things. So let's go to our next one. Now here we have the back view, and like I said, this has panels in the back on one of the views. Maybe both views have it, but it's just so you can have a less voluminous fit in the back, which I really like the idea of this. Now, just ignore this little pleat here. I do not know how that got there. I just thought I hadn't notched my pattern, and when I was sewing it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. There's fabric back here. Maybe there's a pleat, which I thought was really weird since it has the contouring. There's no pleat. I don't know why I had extra fabric there. Muslin is just, you know, hard to wrangle sometimes. All right, so this is a really clear view of like his sloped shoulders here. Maybe we'll go back to red right here. So it looks here like the shoulders are too wide, right? And they are a little tiny bit, but that's, I think, kind of misleading because of the sloping that's happening here. So we can definitely see we have this extra fabric right here. And it's not probably that bad that I'm drawing in, but it's pretty significant. We can also see it's not tight, but you can see it's very smooth here. And then we have these drag lines right here. A lot of crashing happening under the arm. And this tenting back here, right? We can see it kind of swinging out from the body, and we don't like that either. Now here's a little video. And so I asked him to raise and lower his arms so you can kind of see what's happening. I like to be able to see underneath. You can see that tenting in the back there, and you know that it's swinging out. I always do this because I'm about to slope those shoulders quite significantly, so that means I'm going to need to lower the armhole, right? You can kind of see that the armhole is pulling up into him, and that's just because his arm is crashing down on it. You know, it's lower than what this armhole is. The chest looks a little bit too wide, and the hem length is also a little too wide. All right, so now we're getting into kind of the nitty-gritty of his fitting is the shoulder slope and the neck position. And anytime you're fitting something, you always want to start up here. I know the first thing that most people want to do if they're someone with a bust is fit the bust, because you're looking right at that and it's a source of uncomfortableness. But I just beg of you to start with the shoulders and the neck because if you can get really good fitting shoulders, all the rest of it is very easy as long as you have all that other stuff going your way. Because if your arms aren't able to move freely, you're not feeling comfortable up there, it doesn't matter if the bust fits or not. And once you change the bust and then go back to the neck and shoulders, you will most likely affect anything you've already done. So, okay, so here you can see that I'm starting to draw in the neck shape that I'm thinking he needs. I'm also noticing he needs this wedge of extra fabric. It relieved some of this, not stretching, but tension there, but not all of it. You can see here now we're really honing in on this neck. Now look, remember I told you about the garment always pulling towards the side that has the sleeve? Look at the placket, it is off center there at the neck. So you have to remember to kind of check in on that when you're doing things like this. But here we have this neck. It really needs to come down in the front, out at the sides, and it, spoiler alert, it needs to come up in the back. Now we can see how tight this is right here at the ball of his shoulder. It's making this pocket opening buckle. It's making this right here crash because his shoulder, this particular arm, it comes forward more than this one here. You can see this one is definitely not as sloped and it's not coming forward with that tension. But we can still see we have this line here. And you can see I'm already trying to slope out all of that extra there. All right, and so here's a close-up of some of those changes I was just mentioning. And we're really starting to pin it out now. And see how I drew the neck and then I clipped down into it? And that's a really great way to see if it's feeling the way you want it to feel. And then look at that penciled shoulder seam. So that's my shoulder seam, my target shoulder seam. So I'm going to pull it forward. I'm also going to slope it. I'm doing so much to this area of the garment. All right, so I think here we have kind of an overall view. I've now added muslin to the back neck there so I could draw in how much I wanted to raise the neck. You can see right here is the old line and I'm drawing in this right here. This is kind of peeling away, but it lined up with this. And you can see I have that wedge even on the other side. And like I said, I'm not going to fit him for asymmetry, but I am going to get as close as possible. So now back here, if you see that pinch at the yoke seam at the armhole there, that is a round back adjustment. Anytime you have a yoke, you can usually fix a lot of round back issues and it'll present itself with gaping at the armhole. And you're going to notice this mostly if you have the sleeve off. It's going to be masked really well on the sleeved side. And you can also start seeing I'm pinning out the fullness in the back paneling. But we can also see I've added that muslin scrap. I've pinched out the shoulders. And so here's the full back view. I took out a lot of back volume. And just in case you're thinking, why wouldn't you just cut a different size? That's not going to make a difference at all. This pattern is fine. We just all have our own fit issues. You can also see I've folded up the cuff I meant to show you here. That was the sleeve length change. So I was going kind of fast fitting him because I don't want to take up much of his time, So here we go. This is basically the wearable muslin, right? I just realized in doing this video I made one mistake on the fitting and I took off or didn't add where I was supposed to. So that's kind of a great discovery in a way because it involved the neck. And one thing I noticed in the live stream, I was like, why is my collar so large? And that's why, because I accidentally probably scooped the back neck rather than adding to the back neck because of whatever notes I wrote. But this came out really great. I'm really happy with this for a first try. You can kind of see that even if I didn't change the neck, it would probably be fine just because it's not choking him in the front anymore. But that is one area I'm going to revisit if I make this again for him. He loves it, and that makes me really happy because I've made a lot of shirts for this guy. It's the very first gift I ever gave him when we were dating, was a homemade button-up shirt out of hemp that I drafted and everything for him without him knowing. And it's been many that I've made for him, and he said this is now one of his favorites. So let's look at, all right, so now let's look at our changes here just to kind of recap, and I'm going to show you my pattern pieces as well. So this is the long list that I made for myself, and I like to kind of recap because it's really easy to forget things. In fact, in the live stream, I forgot to do this little thing right here, and thankfully I caught it before I started sewing, and I just did it on the pieces. So the one thing I think I forgot to do was add to the back neck right here, and that is why the collar ended up being so long. So we can fix that next time. All right, so let me show you my pattern pieces. Okay, so here you can see the pink and the little bit of red right here is everything I removed from this pattern. So this is, we're looking at the back and the yoke on the left 3 pieces. The pattern piece that you're given for the center back, which would normally be cut on the folds, she gives you a full pattern piece, which I really like. So that's why you're seeing on this piece here the pink removable around 3 sides. So the green line right here is the center back, and the blue and the teal is what I've added to the pattern or moved. And so let's look at this shoulder up here. So we can see that, remember, I dropped my neck. We're looking over here. We dropped the neck. We shaved away from the neck right here at the shoulder. I brought the shoulder forward, and that's why you're seeing the blue over here. When you're moving a shoulder line, if you're not decreasing the slope in any way or adding or changing the slope, you can just move this line wherever you want. If there's a sleeve sewing to it, you need to move the notch that goes to that shoulder seam the exact same amount so that everything is copacetic, right? All right, and so here we've also, I shaved off the outer shoulder a little bit. Here I shaved off the inner neck. I just forgot to add this little guy right here. And then right here is that round back at the top of the side back here and the yoke seam. That's that round back adjustment. And you can see this is how I slimmed down the back there. Right there, right? And so now right here, I want to call your attention to this right here. So now sometimes when I want to maintain seams and I don't want to have to sit there and go, okay, are these going to still sew to the seam it goes to? I will slice down and overlap. So basically slash and overlap, or slash and spread, right? You've probably all heard of that. So I sliced down here to the hem, and then I overlapped a little wedge there and took it out, and I did the same thing here. And this was kind of a really great way that I could not affect this here, this length, and not affect this length. So I basically took like a fisheye dart without it being a dart from top to bottom. So this right here on his right there, you can see that big fold sticking out. That's what I got rid of right there by getting utilizing this yoke seam, which was such a huge blessing for that. All right, and so now I have changed the slope of this shoulder, right? So I removed it. Yes, I moved the shoulder seam. So this dark blue right here and this pink right here, they kind of cancel each other out. I removed it on the front, I added it to the back, but then I increased this wedge here for the shoulder angle, remember? That little splice at his neck right there. That's that. And then I decreased the outer shoulder right here, right? So this neckline is getting larger at the neck end and smaller at the shoulder. So basically, you know, that's decreasing the armhole circumference, which means I need to remove it down here if I'm dropping it up here. Right? So basically we're looking at it as this is, if this is your shoulder and this is your side seam, we did this. We dropped the armhole to a place that suits Michael better. All right, looks like I forgot to draw in the amount I removed off the front hem, but I did remove off about an inch and a half in the back and 5/8 in the front. So something like that. And I kind of played around with the shape of the hem because I didn't want to lose any of the swoopiness. And by taking more off the back and less off the front, it sort of flattened it out. And I know he would like a little bit of a shirt tail hem. All right, so the last thing I just want to show you is sleeve stuff. If you know me at all, you know how much I love sleeves. So one thing about this shirt, I really love this shirt pattern. I had never made it before because I already have a men's shirt pattern, and I just hadn't gotten around to this. And, you know, I don't really need to buy patterns. I can just draft something, but I love paying for patterns as well. I like respecting these companies and the work they're doing. So it was fun to make this. And I think the only things I don't like about it personally are that I really prefer to flat fell the seam of the sleeve to the body and the underarm and the side seam. Basically, I like to flat fell this armhole, the side seam, the underarm, that whole area there. And that's because flannel is pretty thick and chunky, and it just makes it more comfortable. It's lower profile than, say, French seaming, and it's definitely going to be lower profile than like overlocking the edges and sewing them or stitching it down, because flat felling takes out a layer of fabric. So that's just my personal preference. So I had to add seam allowance to all the edges I wanted to flat fell. I added 1/4 inch because there's only 1 centimeter seam allowances, or 3/8, and I like 5/8, especially on the thicker flannels. So this is a roundabout way of saying this cap is a little too peaked for a flat felled seam, and there's ease in this sleeve. So if you've ever had to ease in a set-in sleeve, you know what that's like. And when you're flat felling, that's a very difficult thing to do, especially if we don't have a kind of a flatter cap like that. That's pretty flat. That we don't want something like that, but we do want something that's a little bit, not even like that, just maybe something. You can't really just draw a sleeve, as contrary to what people think. There's a lot of engineering going on with it, but I'm just kind of giving you an idea of something that, and I'm having trouble honestly drawing it, that just gives you a flatter surface, less peak, because trying to turn under and edge stitch fabric on a curve that's being eased is really, really hard to make look good. So anyway, here's where I took out that half cuff width, and this wedge here is how I took out some of the ease in the sleeve. Now, the danger with taking out ease in the sleeve is that you will get rid of the ease on this area here of the shoulder right here for mobility and comfort, right? And thankfully this sleeve was a little large on him, so I could take advantage of that. But I knew it was a little risky. It was one of the things I got a little nervous about. And I also raised the cap to get rid of that vertical drag line on the sleeve, because it needed more cap height, which only makes it pointier, by the way. So the sleeve is something you're probably going to want to look at, and depending on how you want to sew it. So I think I ended up raising the sleeve cap, but I feel like I went out a little bit here, like this, and made it a little bit softer of a curve. And then that way it wasn't so hard. I did struggle to do my flat felled seam, but it turned out pretty good. It is the one thing that if I'm sitting at a restaurant with my husband and I look over at his shirt and he's sitting next to me, I will notice one of my flat felled seams coming undone, and trust me that none of us love seeing that, right? It's a beautiful shirt. I love how it came out. He loves it. There's a couple of tweaks I'll make to it if I make it again. We love the Robert Kaufman Mammoth flannel plaids fabrics, so that was a big win. Oh, the other thing I would mention is I'm not a big fan of how wide the collar is. It looks pretty good on him here, but the collar itself right here is, oh, that's another thing. The collar itself, this distance here, I felt was a little too wide. I feel like it could shave off a little bit, and that's the same with the collar stand. I felt the collar stand was a little too tall, and that's a style choice, so that's just our preference. The one quirk about the collar I'm going to tell you about is that when it's buttoned up, let's see if I can draw. I haven't drawn a wrong collar in a long time. So your collar, this point right here and this point right here, they should be touching each other when your shirt is buttoned up. And they're not on this pattern. There's a gap right here, and I will absolutely change that for next time. So it really should be like this. Excuse my bad drawing. I'm holding my iPad with one hand. So it should be something more like this, where they meet right here. And there's a big gap right there. And that's nothing I did to the pattern. That's how it was. So, and that could be a preference or a style choice. I don't think it looks bad. It's just not my preference. I would like it to close. So that's my only feedback on this pattern. I love this pattern, and I think, you know, of all the men's shirts out there, it's a good one. If you want to watch me do any of these changes, you can watch the live stream, which will be linked in the description of this video. And then I cut and sew it. I cut it off camera. I cut some of it on camera. I matched the plaids with 1 inch of my life on this one. I probably did the best job I've ever done on matching plaids. I'm pretty proud of that. Will he ever get a shirt this well matched? I don't know, but look at that. I matched the yoke seam to the bottom, even the back panels, the sleeves. It's kind of dizzying. I'm not sure if I like how well matched it is. So yeah, we'll see next time. I think I might do a bias cut yoke because there's no pleat along the back yoke seam. And I think that would give it a little bit more movement and be more comfortable for reach for the person wearing it. All right, well, good luck fitting your button-up shirts no matter what pattern you're using. Thanks for watching.